Joe is always 3 minutes late to start, Wayne S., because he has a live 30-second weather hit at the top of the hour to do first, and then he can come on. So that's the answer to your question right off the bat. Hi, everybody. We are here on New Year's Day. Happy New Year and happy polar vortex split day, because the long prophesized, long awaited by snow lovers and winter weather lovers was the split in the polar vortex occurring in the upper levels of the atmosphere. It's here, and now we wait to see where this goes in the next couple of weeks, because this is an evolving process. As those of you who are here every night know, that when we've been talking about, when you talk about pattern change, it is a very, very grinding, oftentimes painful process to watch, but eventually you do get to somewhere. The variables now are, well, where do we go? Well, where does this pattern, this split in the polar vortex, what does it mean for us from a practical standpoint from day to day? It could certainly, I would think, from what I'm seeing, definitely we're going to see a trend toward colder weather in the longer term. Does that mean that we come with snow chances? I think it probably does, but what those snow chances are and how they evolve, and is it going to wind up being cold and dry, which is always possible. You certainly could have. We've had instances of winters where we've had stretches of consistent cold with very little snow, where everything winds up getting suppressed. You could wind up with situations where the cold air, there's just enough of it where it benefits some areas but less so than others. These are all variables that we're going to have to play out, and there's nothing. The word guarantee is nowhere in this equation here, folks. This is just one thing that this is a very good learning experience for all of us in terms of the changes that go on way up in the atmosphere and how they interact with the ground, how they interact with where we live, how they interact with the jet stream levels that drive all the weather systems along. So this is going to be a very good lesson in what happens when these splits occur in the stratosphere and how they ultimately impact everybody else. So we'll get things going. We do actually have a little bit of a snow threat or situation. Maybe threat is a big word, or too strong a word to use, but it looks like we may have a shot for a little bit of light snow here come Wednesday night, tomorrow night into early Thursday morning. And this is because of yesterday's storm system and cold front stalling out to the south. There's going to be a wave on that front. We also have an upward air disturbance coming down in the northern part of the jet that will eventually interact with this, but it probably will be too late to create any big issues. But I think between the two systems, there's the possibility that we could grind out a little bit of light snow, or maybe some light mixed precipitation. In some places, it may just be plain old rain. But nonetheless, we're coming off a day where temperatures got up into the low 60s in many areas briefly this morning. Left over from last night's big rain. We had some gusty winds upstate New York, some places getting gusty winds that brought trees down with gusts of 50 and 60 miles an hour, as our Timothy Veltman reported in the chat a bit earlier. And now we're seeing the colder air that's coming in behind it. So let's get going with our weather tonight. Welcome to my app members, those of you who are on my Google app for Android. That is a free app in case you are in the New York City, Long Island, New Jersey, Lower Hudson Valley, Southern Connecticut area. That app is for you. So if you have an Android device, just go to Google Play and you can download it and install and enjoy. And you can even watch these live streams right from the app. Also from New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut Stormwatch page on Facebook, Angry Ben's Angry Weather, his Facebook page, and of course my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. By the way, I should also mention that I actually did correspond with Dr. Judah Cohen, and he would love to be back on. So I'm going to work out a date and time to get him back on, and hopefully sooner rather than later, so we can have him explain what all of this that's going on in the upper atmosphere and what it ultimately means. Meanwhile, we do have some winter weather, and it's actually in the southern half of the U.S. rather than in the northern half, mainly as you go from Texas west. We have winter weather advisories and winter storm watches up for a good chunk of north central and northwestern Texas and into Oklahoma. Flood watches have now gone up in southeast Texas and across the northwestern half of Louisiana, except the northwest corner, and into parts of Mississippi. New Mexico still getting the snow, with winter storm warnings going on through much of the state, with advisories down to the south, almost down to about El Paso. And we've got winter storm warnings up in southeastern Arizona as a result of this system that's dropping down out of the Rockies and down into Texas. And eventually we're going to get another low coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, some fog around in the northwest, a little bit of flood watch activity going on in the Pacific Northwest, and hard freezes through Arizona and down into parts of Southern California. So the cold continues to be west of the Mississippi. In the east, it's not, the overall pattern is not really particularly warm. It's not cold either. It's kind of straddling the fence there, and I think that's where we're going to be for a while going through the weekend and into next week. The surface map tonight shows the weather front coming through now, has come through New York City and down into southern Pennsylvania, so we're starting to get into some colder air that's up to the north, that's draining down from eastern Canada. But the bitter cold air is where the high is, back in eastern South Dakota, extending on up into the lakes. And the real cold air is with the high center in South Dakota, where we've got teens and single digits going on. And you can see that cold air just goes all the way down, has drained down into North Texas. Pretty cold in Dallas-Fort Worth today. Looks like it's only in the low 40s. And we have 20s in West Texas. So no wonder that we do have these winter storm watches up and winter weather advisories up as well. And then back through New Mexico, where we've got a low analyzed in the southern part of the state, and we're seeing snow being produced with temperatures in the teens and 20s. Here's an easier way. We'll take a look at the temperatures. Sorry, I just realized I didn't switch maps. I do this sometimes, so just bear with me. It'll take me a second. And hold on. Okay, I have to find it now. There we go. There it is. The magic window. Patience, everybody. I'm sorry. It just takes me a while to get all of this going, and some days I'm a little more organized than others. Let me try this again. There we go. Come on. Now we've got it. I guess I'm a little slow on the uptake here on New Year's Day, but here are the temperatures right now as of 7 o'clock Eastern Time, and you're looking at 40s and 30s and down into the 20s. You start to get to the teens way up into upstate New York, and then back across Pennsylvania and Ohio. You start to go north and west of Chicago, so here's where you start to get into the bitter air across Iowa, and below zero temperatures going into this evening now through a good chunk of Minnesota and on up northward toward the Canadian border and into the Dakotas. So that's where the core of that cold air is. And of course, as we work our way down southward through Nebraska and Kansas with temperatures in the teens and low 20s, 20s across Oklahoma, you can see how cold it is through much of Texas except for the southeast. There are your winter storm watches and your winter weather advisories that are posted at the moment, and they are mostly in north central and northwestern Texas, and then back over into New Mexico and southwestern Arizona, where we have the winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories, and all those, you know, the cold air really just kind of drained down into Colorado and up through parts of New Mexico. Now, with respect to snow, just going to pull up the Weather Service's forecast here, and the amounts being shown are on the light side from this system. that's going to be coming through Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. For my area, which basically covers northeastern PA, much of northern New Jersey, actually much of New Jersey, but with emphasis more on the north, Long Island, the Hudson Valley, and southern New England, we're looking at a coating to maybe upwards of an inch or so in some places. The Weather Service has actually kind of brought some snow even onto Long Island, and I think there's an argument to be made that, you know, there might be cold air that'll make it down to southern New England and down to the Long Island area for tomorrow night into Thursday morning, whereas the warmer air will be more in central and South Jersey and southeastern PA, where there it's mostly rain, and then, you know, pretty much a coating to a couple of inches up through upstate New York. The northern part of this feature that's coming through is going to stay separate from the southern part, as long as that is the case. But that northern part might energize that southern system a little bit. That's something we're going to have to watch for in case there's a bit of a surprise. So we'll be paying closer attention to models. We always pay close attention, but we'll pay even closer attention to the next model series that comes out in a couple of hours. Some snow in and around Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. You can see it's mostly on the order of a coating to an inch or two. A little bit of snow up in parts of North Dakota to add to those blizzard conditions. Those bitter conditions. Although with the wind up there, an inch of snow coming, a little bit of snow coming down as snow blows around, wouldn't be surprised if there's some local ground blizzards that occur. Meanwhile, here's the snow forecast. North and west of Dallas-Fort Worth, up to a couple of inches. Ice might be an issue here, and it might be the bigger issue with this next developing low that's going to impact the Northeast and the Middle Atlantic states with some rain late Friday night and on Saturday, or later Friday night and on Saturday. And of course, we've got the additional snows that are forecast for the areas in New Mexico and southeastern Arizona, where we still have the winter storm warnings up. On up into the northern Rockies, a bit quiet till you get to the northernmost areas, and then you're starting to see snows again, with some big snows being forecast for the mountains up in Washington State. That's a 40-inch print that you see there, and in those mountains, they get it. Okay, they really do. All right, so let's take a look at how all of this is going to play out. I'm going to start with the we'll start with the NAM model. I think that's probably the best one to use here at this point, and I'm going to just go to, hang on, NAM, and we'll start with Wednesday night into Thursday, and this is what's in question here. Is there's actually two short waves. It's hard to see one of them. We've got better luck with the other. So hang on one second. I'm going to bring the paint box up, and we'll analyze what's happening here. So you guys should be seeing the paint box in short order. And you are. Okay, good. So this is the upper air for Wednesday night into Thursday morning. It's hard to see. There is a short wave here in the southern stream. It's very hard to pick out because the problem is you've got this big upper high. You can only sort of see the edge of that big upper high that's near the Bahamas that's pushing up. So it's kind of in a ridge position here. And then you've got this short wave in the northern stream. And as long as these two stay separate, they really would go by rather innocently. You'll just wind up with a little bit of precip from either one. Perhaps there'll be an area that's too far south for the northern stream energy, too far north for the southern stream energy, and you won't get much of anything. But there is a chance, and I think models have been kind of leaning closer and closer to this direction over time as this situation has evolved. The northern stream is coming through a little stronger and a little faster. The southern stream a little bit slower. So the question is whether that northern stream shortwave is going to wind up interacting with the southern stream shortwave in a developing low that's going to form off the Virginia, North Carolina coast and push out to the east-northeast. So this is where sometimes you can get a surprise. If that northern energy is a bit more important, it could give a little zap there to that southern stream system. We'll show you how it plays out on the NAM right now, and it kind of keeps everything separate, making it not a big deal. But I still want to keep an eye on it because it does generate a fair amount of precip here. Back it up. This is the old front from yesterday. You get a wave that develops on it and runs out. You can barely see it here until it pops up once it's off the North Carolina, Virginia coast. This is at 1 a.m. Thursday. And you can see the snow that's being produced. Let me run it backwards. But you can see the northern energy coming in and producing snow across the Great Lakes and in through northern Pennsylvania and into New York State. And there's your surface low by 4 a.m. Thursday east of the Delaware coast, which it just pulls out to the east. And you'll notice, at least from the way in the world according to the NAM, that gap in the middle. It still is trying to keep the streams a bit separate. The RGEM model, interestingly enough, actually does a different view of this, and it seems as if it's got that northern stream energy a bit further along and a bit faster coming in tomorrow evening, and there's your southern low that starts to pop up. It's closer on the RGEM model. Here, the RGEM is showing rain to Long Island and through much of northern New Jersey, except the northern areas of northern New Jersey where it's snow, northeastern Pennsylvania, on up through upstate New York. I want to be a little careful here because of the fact that you do have some cold air that's draining down tonight and on Wednesday. Watch your temperatures tomorrow. See if they get much above the mid and upper 30s, because if they don't, it could be a little extra juice for this thing to feed on in terms of having a little more cold air to work with. So this, again, I think we have to be on the lookout for a potential for a coning to an inch or so from northern New Jersey, say along or north of Route 78 into Pennsylvania, north of Route 78, and then on up into New England. And as when you get up further north into upstate New York, into parts of New England, wouldn't shock me to see a couple of places wind up with a couple of inches out of this as it moves away. And even Boston may actually get some snow out of this if this is right. This is the kind of situation where the RGEM can outperform the other models. So that's why I wanted to bring it up tonight. Also, you'll notice back through Texas, and you got the next weather system with snow and freezing rain that peaks out on the middle of the day Thursday before it starts to wane a little bit. The low moving out to the northeast. That is going to be heading for the mid-Atlantic coast for late Friday night and on Saturday. The other thing I want to point out, too, is that after this low goes by Thursday morning, there's really no cold air around to speak of. You've got westerly isobars across the plains into the western Great Lakes, and that is bringing milder air. So these places that are double-digit below zero are going to see their readings climb up above freezing and more come Thursday into Friday. So a big warm-up is in store for those areas as this next system pulls away to the northeast. So where that one goes, and here we have the GFS, so we can go out a bit further here. There's your low for Friday into Friday night and Saturday. Brings some rain. Doesn't really intensify all that much. Great track, no cold air. Because, though, again, look at the isobars and look at there's a low sitting there near Lake Winnipeg. You've got basically westerly winds across southern Canada. There just isn't any real cold air. You just have this bland Pacific air that we're dealing with. That low moves out, and then going into next week, we're going to wait until Tuesday. And here's where we have the model showing a system heading up to the western lakes with a much more ample shot of cold air that comes in on the 8th and 9th. The model's been getting a little more bullish with this cold air, and I'm wondering whether it is beginning to respond to what's going on up in the stratosphere with the split in the polar vortex. Not going to do that yet, but I just want to throw that question out there, that this was something that we discussed with regards to the model behavior over the last week or so, going into all this, to expect model volatility. And I think that's what we're seeing. As we get closer to the shorter range, models will start to settle on what the look is going to be. So at least through early next week, a bit of ridging in the eastern part of the United States, being replaced by a trough toward the end of the week that pulls out. You've got a flattish ridge ahead of another shortwave that comes in almost right behind it. So there's a gradual trend toward troughing in the east, ridging in the west as we head into the middle part of the month. And every run's going to have a different look in terms of the profile of what the upper air is going to look like. Here is today's 18Z run, but I want to go back to the 12Z run. Again, everyone's going to have a different picture, but watch the overall evolution of this. We also, by the way, we do have this big upper high that's been sitting over England, and it's pushing higher pressures up into Greenland as well. So we do actually have a slightly negative NAO that's in play through all of this. I think that's the one reason why it doesn't go super blowtorch here in this period while we wait for the pattern to change. Even though the Pacific is a mess and you don't really have any kind of strong polar flow, the slightly negative NAO is kind of keeping a big warm-up in check. It keeps the ridge in the east from flying all the way up. And you're still getting some energy moving across southern Canada, but as we go through time, and now we're at day 7, you can start to see there's more of a polar flow connection develop. It's not a strong one, but it's there. It starts to show up around day 7 and 8. You've got actually, higher than normal pressures building from just south of Iceland all the way into Labrador here. So there is some blocking being indicated. And there you have, as we now move into days 12, 13, and 14, and 15 and 16, you are seeing this, fairly impressive upper-low vortex up in southeastern Canada with a very cold flow of air coming down from Canada and into the eastern part of the United States. In general, the takeaway is the specifics are obviously going to change, but at least the model trends over the last couple of days suggest that we are going to be going into this colder pattern as we head toward the middle part of January, or maybe even a little bit sooner. It might start as early as the 9th or 10th. Again, remember, it's a grinding stair-step process. We're not going to go from much above normal to much below normal in a blink of an eye, in a snap of a finger, or by turning on a light switch. It's a stair-step decline responding to what's happening in the upper air with the polar vortex. I'm going to switch to that now, and one of the, I find it hysterical, by the way. It's amazing to me how short people's memories are. We just had, we came off a winter last year where somebody actually said this to me, that we had no winter last year until March. Okay, really? So late November to the first part of January, where temperatures were averaging a large number of degrees below normal, never happened. The bays on Long Island and in New Jersey didn't freeze over. The first time in my memory in 30 years living on Long Island that the bays were frozen before Christmas. Seriously? It's incredible to me. And it's incredible to me that the memories also are short in terms of the winters. Look, I guess I shouldn't expect everybody to remember this sort of stuff. I'm in the business. I'm supposed to remember this. But it's just incredible to me that January 1st, and you've got these emotional snow weenies throwing in the towel. I said this last night, and I'll say it again. If you want to go throw temper tantrums, please go do it elsewhere, because it's just, it's silly. It's like you're acting like a child. I can't get my snow and cold right now, so I'm gonna scream up and down that winter is over and it's never gonna happen. It's hilarious. It just doesn't work that way. I don't know where the impression, where the idea that it's cold and snow from November 1st to April 30th started. But let's watch this polar vortex split. We can actually go back 3 days. Okay, so so that you know what you're looking at. I'll bring the paint box back again, and I'll bring it up on the screen. 1 second here. All right, so okay, so here is your polar vortex, and let me get my paintbrush. All right, here is the polar vortex, which let me get the. I guess I have to do it in black. Right here, okay, and it's stretched out. Okay, you don't have it in one concentric circle anymore, which is what you had going in through the middle part of December, which, by the way, set up the warming that we have now. And also a very good point. Dr. Cohen made this point on his blog, and I said this last night, and for those of you who weren't here, I'll repeat it again. Every weather pattern sets the seeds, eventually plants the seeds of its own destruction. The warming that we're seeing is an integral part of this process of getting the vortex to split. So in other words, if you don't have warming occurring somewhere in the atmosphere over the northern hemisphere, then you're not going to get the polar vortex to split. So you kind of have to. It's sort of like taking your medicine. If you're a snow lover, you're taking your medicine now so that you can get your outcome that you want later, and that's what's happened here. The polar vortex being attacked by warm air, and the upper high that represents that is, and I'll do that in purple. This is your upper high, okay, and that warm air signified by the darker reds and browns that you see there, getting into the flow of the polar vortex and creating the split. And now we'll watch it split going forward. The first map there is from December 29th. I'll make it a little smaller so we can get the whole thing in the screen. Let me just make sure you guys can see this, and you can. So there's your polar vortex, and now we are at tonight. Here is the split, and there it goes. Now you've got two vortices. You've got one that migrates back up toward northern Europe. The other one is dropping down into southeastern Canada, and even down to New Brunswick in that particular area. If you follow the flow at that level of the atmosphere runs across the Arctic Ocean to about Greenland, and then funnels southward down into Canada and into the eastern part of the United States. Now you might say, well, Joe, how come it's not? If the flow is like that in the stratosphere, why is it not, down here at the ground? Because we're basically starting the engine to get the gears turning, and the gears are in the lower part of the atmosphere are going to eventually get impacted by the change that's happening now. It just takes time to get there. You're changing, you're talking about 7 miles up, and then you start to see the impact of the change in the pattern gradually work its way through the tropopause and down into the lower part of the atmosphere. And that's going to take a number of days to play through. But the longer that you have this condition here, obviously, the longer you're going to have the ensuing pattern. So it's doing what it's supposed to do. The wrapped up vortex sits in eastern Canada. Now we are at this coming Sunday, January 6th. The upper high is moving across over the polar regions in the stratosphere. And that upper low, that vortex, at least from the last couple of forecasts, just kind of sits in eastern Canada. What's interesting to me, and this is a question I'm going to ask Dr. Cohen when we get him on, is this is the first time, and I haven't been looking at this long enough, so he might correct me on this, but the vortex in Canada is actually looking to be stronger than the vortex that remains back in Siberia, at least for a while. And you'll notice through the 16-day period, it just basically covers all of Canada and the United States. You've got a vortex that's back up in Siberia and a weak upper high that's built in the middle. The implications of this, by the way, in terms of the surface, is that eventually you're going to, there's an oscillation called the Arctic Oscillation. And that, when pressures rise across the Arctic and that oscillation goes negative, it displaces cold Arctic air southward. So this look would suggest that you would see Arctic air gradually getting displaced southward. It's going to take time for the models that we look at, the levels of the atmosphere that we look at. It's going to take time for that to start showing up in earnest. I think we're seeing the clues of all of this, and the pieces slowly coming together, but I think we also have many days to watch the evolution of this. Here's by the way, if you look at the European, late in the period, take a look at what's up in the Arctic regions over near Greenland and through the Arctic Circle. It's high pressure, okay? So this is a negative Arctic oscillation that is developing here. This is in response to the split of the polar vortex. This is what you're seeing. I'm going to try to make this a little bit bigger. And there you have it. There's all high pressure there if the European is right. It's an interesting development in the European beat today because of the fact that the European has been kind of lagging a bit in terms of showing the changes going forward as opposed to the GFS. And from what I've been picking around in some weather chat rooms today, people talking about the European, that it seems to be gaining, coming on more on board. It's not quite there yet, but it seems to be gaining with the idea of what the GFS has been telegraphing, and it's and this is going to have longer term implications as we go toward the middle part of January, the latter part of January, and early February. I think this is a fascinating thing to watch play out. It really is. It has been a really big learning experience for me, and I hope that you're getting a lot out of this, because watching the atmosphere at work, watching these gears turning, we're looking at the hemisphere here from the top down, which is sometimes it's a little weird to look at, but if you watch how all those gears are turning, keep an eye, by the way, also now important too, look at the Pacific, which has got this amorphous mess that has been flooding the U.S. with warm air. And of course, as we go through time, it becomes a little bit less amorphous. You start to get higher pressures building in the Pacific, troughs shifting around away from the Aleutians and more toward the international date line. That's a very important development in order to create the displacement of cold air. And if you follow the height lines here, you can see on the European how they run up from Alaska and northern Canada and move down into the Great Lakes and Plains, and you've got troughing into the east. It's the start of the, we're starting to see this model come around. So I think what you should expect going forward is more roller coaster rides. I don't be surprised if you wind up with a couple of runs or two that throw a few hiccups at this. That's certainly a possibility. Seen that happen often enough. I can remember back from the pattern change from mid-February as we're going into March, that actually happened a couple of times where you were sort of, questioning, is this going to happen or is it not going to happen? I don't be shocked if you wind up, if you look at this on tropicaltidbits.com or wherever you're looking at weather models, where you do wind up with a hiccup or two that lets you, kind of question what's going to happen. Part of the process. But I'm feeling every day that goes by, I'm feeling a bit more confident that this is where we're headed for the longer term. A lot of, I know it's a lot of information to digest, but it's nonetheless, you got to take it as a process. Robert Hurley, the European, okay, you got to be careful looking at this far out because of all the changes that are taking place. It's going to take time for models to come into play with regards to how cold it's actually going to be. Listen, there's nothing here. By the way, let me make clear. We're not talking. I mean, I am not specifically talking about anything in terms of the magnitude of how cold it's going to get. That's one of the big unknowns. Will it get? I would think it would get at the very least seasonably cold. I would also think that it would probably get at the very least a little bit below normal in most places. Now, whether the extremes are taken further or not really is going to depend on the atmosphere itself, and how stretched out is it going to be. That is something that we can't really figure. And I'll have to tell you quite honestly, if I saw the weather models now in the long range really going off the wall cold, I would be suspicious. Okay, and if we're going to start throwing the potential for some blocking in the equation with the North Atlantic Oscillation going negative in this period, that also is going to put another variable into all of this. So it's at here. I think what we're seeing is the general process of where we're headed, and the unknowns are going to be the day-to-day specifics, which we really can't get to until we're at the very least inside 7 days. Okay, Rob J. I saw a video of a robotic voice saying we will freeze in January and February about the polar vortex. Of course, no one likes videos with robotic voices. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know what I don't know what that is or what kind of value that is. Did the robot show you the European and the GFS? I don't know, but I've kind of illustrated what I think is going to happen from the standpoint of the weather models, and we'll take it from there. Andrew Thaber, according to NOAA, why is the polar vortex split coming? This info has been known for weeks. So how would El Nino be closer to the coast? Okay, Andrew. All right. So I think I don't see what the other part of that thread is. The odd thing is, for those of I was reading today. Somebody was pointing out that the kind of readings that they were get in some of the indices with regards to the El Nino were actually in readings that you would normally see in a La Nina situation. So that was sort of odd. I think a few people were quoting the SOI index, which when it's negative, it's more favorable for snow, and it actually has gone negative again. But my point is that with respect to El Nino, there have been a few people talking about the fact that that it looks as if the whole Pacific is on fire, and we showed the water temperature maps the other day. That is not true. The anomalies are above average. They seem to be a little bit more above average in the East Pacific versus the Central and West, but they are above average all the way across. But it's a stark difference from the El Nino of 15-16, where the entire Pacific really was on fire. So I don't think, plus the water temperature profile of the Pacific was actually very similar to the water temperature profile in early January 2015. They actually match up fairly well, and that winter we saw a major pattern shift in the middle of the month of January that put us into where many areas wound up having their coldest Februarys or top 5 coldest Februarys on record, and we were basically in the refrigerator from the last 10 days of January through the month of February and virtually all of the month of March. I don't think that the El Nino is really it. I think what I think the fact that we had the polar vortex in the stratosphere kind of hovering up near the Arctic regions and leaning towards Siberia, where you didn't have any kind of polar flow since the early part of December, coming in to the eastern part of the United States. Remember, we were cold from mid-November to mid-December, right till about the 14th, 15th. And then we wound up losing, then that set up the Pacific pattern. Remember, patterns set the seeds of their own destruction, and the cold pattern that we had from mid-October to early December set the seeds of the destruction, which led to the big warm-up, and now the quote-unquote big warm-up, but the warm-up now has sowed the seeds of its own destruction by playing a big role in the splitting of the polar vortex in the stratosphere, and now we're going to see the implications of that going forward. Peter Vicker, I don't really know a whole lot about the Southern Oscillation Index, which is what the SOI is. It's not one that I really pay attention to, but it is just like the NAO and the EPO. It measures the pressure changes that occur across the tropical Pacific, but I don't know what the geography is that it covers. But apparently, the way it's measured, when it is negative, it is favorable for snow and cold in the eastern part of the United States. When it's positive, it's not, and we've just come through a period where that SOI index was positive. It has now gone negative, from what I've seen a few people that follow it have posted. So that's another, I guess that's another check mark in the box of where we're going in terms of the long range pattern. Anthony Orr is around somewhere. I guess with the New Year's, everybody's kind of off kilter in terms of the schedule, but he may pop on. Sometimes he pops on a little bit late. Jennifer Crooks asking about Scotland. Welcome. You know, one of the things, Jennifer, with respect to the polar vortex as far as Europe is concerned, and this is something that has to be worked out in terms of where your part of the vortex goes, okay? And I'm going to, we'll bring the maps back up here. So hang on one second, because you've got your part of the vortex. It goes up into Northern Europe. And I think one of the issues with that is going to be, well, just exactly where does it go into Northern Europe? So I'll bring up the map of Europe and we'll take a look with what's been happening with the latest model trends. And here is the upper air. Now, the feature right now is the fact that you've got this gigantic upper high that's sitting right off the coast of, right in the English Channel, in the entrance to the English Channel. That upper high has been there for a while. Most of the cold air has been more to the east as you get into Siberia. Now that upper high is going to try to get out of the way, but because of where the polar vortex is at the moment, the cold air, and we go into here later this week, for example, you've got a cold flow of air coming in from the Arctic regions up into Northern Europe, but it comes in more in Central and Eastern Europe. It gets down deep into the Mediterranean here, into Italy and into Greece and over into Turkey. So for England and Ireland at the moment, you're too far west. You've got this upper high that's sitting there, so the cold air is actually getting deflected to the west. Now, the thing is with the polar vortex, it's got to get into a spot where you're going to see these troughs and shots of cold air come further west than they are now. And over time, there is some indication that that might happen. At least there was yesterday. But today was one of those runs where the polar vortex in the upper atmosphere gets pretty far east and goes deep into Siberia, so the cold flow never really gets to the coast here from the east. It actually stays more in the interior of Europe and over into Siberia. So you're gonna have to do some model adjusting over time. I did show it last night, for example. I have to go back a couple of runs. Hang on one second. That was the European, by the way. The GFS will give us a better view and a smoother view of this. But here's the problem for cold and snow for you, is the fact that this upper high through the next 10 days doesn't quite get out of the way. And it just sits there. And it has to break down. And it really doesn't break down until you get late in the forecast period. This is taking longer and longer to break down based on the runs that we saw today versus yesterday. And if you watch on the right side of the picture, you can see these upper lows, these strong upper air lows with cold air that plunge down more to the south than they do more to the south and east than they do to the west and north. So you've got to get that trough to be further west is the bottom line. And today's runs suggest that it might be a struggle to do that if the polar vortex that goes on the European Asia side winds up pushing to the west. Now, one run does not a forecast make. This is maybe this goes against what the models were doing last night, which had a much colder look for Europe, especially for Central and Western Europe in the long term, which is out about 10 days to 2 weeks. So perhaps for you, you're seeing one of those hiccups I talked about a little while ago. So we're gonna watch how the models progress going forward over the next couple of days. But you know, in summary, I think I honestly think that this is going to be an interesting time ahead and a very good learning experience. Oh, by the way, it just reminded me, we didn't even take a look at what soon will be the new operational GFS, and that is the parallel GFS. So why don't we take a look at that and see what that's doing. I haven't looked at it, so I'm looking at it for the first time with you guys. There's no Europe on this. Again, prepare for hiccups because they can happen. So here we go. I'm just going to look at the upper air. We're into sun this weekend. Still got that flow mostly off the Pacific, ridge in the east. Here comes a trough with that cold front for Monday and Tuesday of next week. A little bit of a trough right behind it. I'm sorry. Hold on. I clicked too many buttons. So let's take a look again. Sorry about that. I'm trying to juggle, you try to juggle all these maps and all these models, and it gets so crazy. Make this a bit bigger for everybody. All right, so let's watch and see. Maps courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, folks, as we know. So we'll start at 132 hours. So we're starting at next Monday. Trough into the east with a cold front. Another trough follows. Very interesting here. Look at the block on the parallel GFS. You see the blocking high in the upper right, building from Iceland to Greenland. Notice that the trough that comes through for the early part of next week doesn't really get out of the way. It just kind of starts to rotate around. And you start getting short waves rotating and diving around it. Very interesting. But definitely a much colder look here. You've got a polar connection coming down from northern Canada. This is a much colder overall look that evolves. And if you want to believe the parallel GFS, it really starts to come into play next, the 9th. Wednesday is the 9th, so Tuesday, Wednesday next week starts the ball rolling to wherever we're going to wind up. I'm curious to see here, right in here. I wonder, that's a diving upper low. Of course, this is in the long range, so I'm sure it's probably got some sort of catastrophic event for somebody. So let's take a look. I'm joking in case somebody's going to take me literally, but let's take a look at the surface. Yep, figured. Well, it never take these long range models literally. The long range part of the models literally. It's the overall flavor of the patterns what's more important. And here you have it. Okay, so this is at 174 hours, folks. To get this cold front come through, that's next Wednesday. That's a week from now. It does turn somewhat colder. Then you've got another system, and this is where this low sort of dissolves out and reforms offshore. But now you've got a cold high with some cold air really coming into play as we move into January 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and it's got this diver low behind it. Makes an ocean storm, makes a pretty deep ocean storm. And I have to tell you, I mean, I'm looking at this. If the parallel GFS if it has the idea right, I think we're for cold weather and snow chances, I think the possibilities are going to be there. We just got to be patient. Really, that's what it boils down to, is just is being patient. A lot of fun though watching all this happen. I can't wait till tomorrow and come with the models that's got a ridge in the east and a trough in the west, which is always a chance of happening. Jess Harden, I know you're in Alabama. You're going to need a perfect setup. So you really want you really want a very, very cold flow to set up in a very, very big way. I don't know that it's going to happen. I will tell you this: if you do wind up getting this pattern change, I will bet that at some point you will get your one opportunity this winter to see some snow. Okay. Usually you get that one chance in the south. You don't get many winters where you get multiple chances. So I think you're going to have to be very, very patient, but watch it evolve like everyone else. And Jacob, you're going to, again, patience. The pattern is evolving. I don't think you're going to see any snow from the system for Wednesday night into Thursday, the weak system that we're going to have here in the east. Nor will you see anything from the system for Friday night and for Saturday. Rick 8013, North Carolina stats, 175 hours of 35 degrees or colder. That's what you started the year with, which for down there, that's impressive. Hurricane Florence, 105 mile an hour wind gusts for Wilmington, and 102.4 inches of rain. That is absolutely insane. The rain in some places in the east has been, totally out of control. You want me to give Tess Delaware weather guy? I don't know. I'm kind of glad you guys are getting a lot out of it, and that's a good thing. Good question. Are we going to transition from Gulf systems to Clipper systems? That's, Greenfire, that's a very good question, and I think a lot depends on, what does the Pacific jet do in all of this? Does it get cut off, or is there going to be a bit of an arm that gets maintained where you get an active southern part of the jet that brings some weather systems along? That's a big question in all of this. If you wind up with a pattern where cold air is too overwhelming, then it really isn't going to make a difference. So you're going to want that sort of delicate balance with just enough cold air, but not too much cold, but not a whole lot of cold air, and at the same time to get that southern part of the jet remaining more active. I think that's one of the big questions going forward. But if the northern part of the flow gets established fairly strongly, then you would probably wind up seeing more clippers. Okay, I did see, where is that? I just saw a question. Christopher Alley, rainfall at Islip, I believe, fell just short of the record, but it was about 64 inches, so it was number 2. I haven't had a chance to see what the specific amounts were from yesterday. So if it's not the wettest, it was the second wettest. Scott Reese, that was the question. What are the teleconnections saying? How do I interpret them with this possible vortex split? Okay, so first off, in terms of the actual maps, because of the government shutdown, the long-range divisions has been deemed not essential, so we're not really getting the maps. So you're kind of doing it, I'm sort of eyeballing it. The NAO is negative. The PNA, and the EPO is positive. The PNA right now is negative. So, and the AO is probably straddling neutral. So what I'm seeing, what you're going to see is the NAO going negative to possibly even strongly negative if the model trends continue this way. The Arctic Oscillation is going to go negative based with the split. The EPO, I think, will trend to negative, which would favor cold in the east, but there's still stuff going on in the Pacific that makes it a bit problematic, so we're going to have to see. The PNA looks like it wants to go positive. So if you're going to have a trough in the east and a ridge in the west, you're going to have a positive PNA. So I think the teleconnections are all going to be going toward, going toward the readings that you're going to want to see for cold weather and wintertime in the eastern part of the United States. And by the way, just to touch on the whole concept of the wet weather that we've had, when you look at the statistics, it was thrown on one of my videos. One of the commenters back a week or two ago, John Smith, pointed out that at least in New York, in every year that we've had, and all of these years happened, by the way, as my colleague Joe Rayo pointed out, since 1970. But since 1970, every time New York City has gone over 60 inches with rainfall, the winters that have winters that have occurred that follow that calendar year have. So in other words, we just had a year of 60 inches or more of rain. So this winter, going from December through March of 2019, in every case that there's been at least 60 inches of rain, we've wound up with below average snowfall. Now, the thing is with that statistic, you got to be careful because of the fact that during from 1970 to 2000, well, almost every year was below normal snowfall. So is it because we had 60 or more inches of rain in the pattern that goes with it, warmer pattern, more rain, or was there something else at play? Were we, in some sort of cyclical downturn as far as snow is concerned? In the last 20 years, we've seen more and more 20-inch plus snowstorms than we did in the prior 80. So it's a very, very small data set. So I hesitate. You can't really use it as an absolute. You just, as far as the forecast is concerned, you can roll the dice and say, okay, it's below normal snowfall because it's based on the fact that 8 times we were over 60. I would be nervous making a forecast like that, knowing that we've been in a pattern in the last 20 years where a 20-inch snowstorm can appear just like that. Frank Sinatra is on tonight. Well, that's good. Good to see you. Why such a discrepancy with the different models regarding the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation? I think you point out that the European's been different. There has been a lot of discrepancy over the last week or so with these models with respect to the Madden-Julian oscillation. I honestly believe that the extreme nature of what we're seeing going on in the stratosphere, I think it's just impacting models in a very big way. It's just making them a bit crazy, and they are they're highly volatile, and you're seeing these sort of wild swings going on and models conflicting. We had a number of different runs over the last week or so where the European and the Canadian would have a deep trough in the east, and the GFS would have a big ridge in the east, and the trough in the west, and it would happen not once but multiple times during a given model series. I think that now that the split is taking place right now, we're going to continue with this volatility for a little while, but gradually the models are going to start settling down. The European seems to have come around today in its run in getting closer to what some of the other models are saying, but I would just definitely look for more hiccups. But I really think it's the split in the polar vortex in the stratosphere. This happened when it happened last February, in the middle of February. We had a crazy couple of weeks with model runs trying to catch up to all the implications, and the atmosphere was stretched to so many extremes in the latter part of February and March. And that resulted in those 4 nor'easters, among other things. So you have to expect more volatility. Delaware weather guy, remember that when you take these pictures, when you take snapshots of the teleconnections, be it today or that's exactly what they are. They're based on the model runs that are done. So you're gonna, what it sees today is negative, then gets neutral to slightly negative through the middle of the month. That to me, that's fine. I'm not really too concerned with the NAO as a whole. I think it's, I've always said that that's vastly overstated and overrated as far as its weather impacts. I think people put too much emphasis on it. The negative NAO was the big reason why that mid-Atlantic snowstorm in December didn't make it to much further north than southernmost Delaware for the northern fringe of precip. So you can have too much NAO, and that suppresses everything to the south. If you have not enough NAO, then things wind up going more north and west. So it's a very, very delicate balance. Crazy Golden Twister 888. Crazy. 2 years ago we were in a big drought here in the Northeast, but now we're dealing with incredibly wet. Rubber bands always snap. Think back to California. Think of the big drought that lasted how many years in California, and then they got absolutely hammered with rain when the rubber band finally snapped back. I believe it was in 16 with incredible amounts of rain. They literally got 5 years worth of rain that they made up for the 5-year drought that they didn't get. And I think that nature's way of doing things and stretching rubber bands seldom is the weather average. You'll notice that we always seem to be pulling at one end or the other, which is, the warming and the resulting cooling in the atmosphere. They both work hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Otherwise, you would have a flat atmosphere everywhere, and no volatility means no weather. So you got to have one with the other. The warm pattern sows the seeds of its own destruction to create a compensating cold pattern at some point. And maybe I think there's a fairly good chance that that's what we're seeing happening at the moment. All right, so we're over an hour tonight on this New Year's Day. Thanks for being here. You might have missed it at the beginning. I just want to say again, I did correspond with Dr. Judah Cohen, and he said he'd be more than happy to come back on and talk about all this. So I'm going to try to work something out over the next couple of days and figure out when will be a good time. I would like to get him on while this whole process is underway, so he can really explain what it is we're looking at, what is happening, and what we can expect. So I hope everybody had a very, very happy New Year. That front and center. I hope your New Year was great. I hope you had a great time, and you had a good day off today, and you're getting settled with things, because pretty soon it is back to work time. Let me just take a moment to do a little shameless self-promotion on this new year. We'll make it nice and big and obnoxious, okay? But I do have my weather platform on Patreon. It's a subscription platform. It's just $2 a month. It goes a long way to support a lot of the stuff I'm doing on my websites, my app for Google, which is free, by the way, for Android devices. But if weather is really your thing, here's a link. It's just $2 a month, and we do, among other things, you get private live streams just for Patreon members, which we did this morning. And you also can message me at any time with questions and comments. I get very much involved in the conversations that go on Patreon, which I'm not really doing as much anymore on Facebook, because I'm trying to get this nice little weather community going. So consider it if you will. Again, it starts at just $2 a month. Actually, for most of you, that would be fine. If you're a snow removal guy and you need more hand holding, I do have some higher tiers. If you'd like, and you download the free app, it basically focuses on the New York City, Long Island, northern New Jersey, lower Hudson Valley, and southern Connecticut area. But I do put stuff up there that is long range related and talks about other things. So you can take a look at that. It's absolutely free. You can download that on Google Play, and I've got the link there up on the chat board. And hopefully the new year will finally bring the iPhone version approval soon. The holidays are very tough in the technical world, because a lot of these companies basically closed down from right before Christmas till right after New Year's. So if you want to get something done, you really can't. And now I'm just waiting for everybody to get back to work so I can get the iPhone version out there. So hopefully we can get that finally done. Just trying to think if there's anything else that I have to tell you guys, and the answer at this point is no. So tomorrow morning we'll do a Patreon live stream for Patreon members. That's usually at around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Might wait till after the NAM is done so we can have it for a look at this system for tomorrow night. And then, of course, we've got tomorrow night's YouTube live stream at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And Joe Rayo is back. My colleague Joe Rayo is back so tomorrow. So maybe we'll get him on and we'll do a duo tomorrow. Have a great night and a great week, rest of your week. Happy New Year. We'll see you tomorrow.